right, welcome back, folks. The next talk is going to be from Jesse Bishop. He is the musician behind the synthwave act Street Cleaner. Jesse is here to demystify some of your questions about music law in his talk, The ABCs of CYA, an intro to intellectual property. There's a lot to learn here. It's a really interesting talk. Jesse has written music and licensed music for companies like NBC, Taco Bell, General Mills, Microsoft, Universal. He's got a lot of experience with this. He's also self-published music on all formats, including his recently released video game, Street Cleaner, the video game, available on Nintendo Switch and PC, which just came out earlier this year. We're really excited to have Jesse here to talk with us about music copyright. And we know that this information is going to be super helpful for a lot of people to understand an area that can be quite daunting if you're not aware of it. And take heart, because we got Jesse here to walk you through it. So welcome to the show, Jesse.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really stoked to be talking. I just want to give everybody a heads up that I'm going to be more talking about probably decision making and when it comes to intellectual property, which I think is something that really doesn't often pop up on Google search results. Hi, I'm Jesse. I'm somebody that makes music and has fun doing it. Welcome to the ABCs of CYA. CYA, of course, stands for Cover Your Assets, right? Okay. Anyways, I'm going to get going. I'm going to get moving. Another disclaimer here. This slideshow is going to have all of the production values of that 7th grade teacher that was trying to just be one of the cool kids and like would put memes in there and stuff. So forgive me because I'm going to insert some funny memes here. Who am I and why am I why do I feel qualified to speak about intellectual property? Well, I am Street Cleaner. I am a musician who basically started writing music under the moniker Street Cleaner about 8 or 9 years ago, and 9 years ago, and I have a costume that I wear on stage, a character pretty much that I play, and I write music like as if it were, how do I explain it? I write soundtracks to a movie series that doesn't exist, which would be, the Street Cleaner series and that kind of thing. And so it's been kind of neat because writing cinematic type music has fallen really easily into licensing and stuff like that. So I have a little bit of experience with licensing. I have worked with General Mills, Microsoft, NBC, In Exile, Taco Bell, Nintendo, Deutsch, Universal, and a lot more. And I wanted to go over some things that I wish I would have known before all of this even started. So even though I have all these fun little accolades under my belt, I still don't have a blue check mark next to my name. So if anybody can help me with that, I'd appreciate it. So the music industry. The music industry never changes. The music industry has changed. Remember all those stores, Sam Goody, you'd go into the mall? I mean, they're all gone now. Hence the whole music industry has changed. But I mean, you'd go into Sam Goody, and we all have stories about how we could go in there and spend hours and hours and hours just combing through CDs, looking through records and tapes and what have you. And it was almost like a lot of people have this reverence for that time. Like they look back at it as like, oh, those were the good old days. But honestly, those days sucked. They were only good for one person, and that was the people that ran these, record labels. They controlled what got into stores. They controlled what you got your hands on, and there was they were gatekeepers. And they did that with intellectual property. If you wanted to be a musician and stuff, there's no way that you would get your music manufactured, let alone into stores, let alone advertised, let alone anywhere, because you had to, pretty much hand over your IP, your intellectual property, that's your songs and, your name, your likeness, all that other fun stuff. You'd have to hand that over to, a company that would then use that to market you and stuff. And you hear things like, oh, this album sold 100,000 copies. Wow, that's intense. But then when you find out that the artist ended up only getting about 7 cents, per unit sold, after everything, it's like, is that really, a good deal? Is that really a great deal? Because the people making money on that stuff, they weren't always the artist. They were the record executives. Look at this guy. He's trying to sell you some Rod Stewart. This guy's pretty cool. I've never been to a Camelot Music. I just saw this picture in some search results, and I thought it looked pretty cool. I would definitely shop there, but it also seems like a high pressure place where they'd probably so what kind of music you looking for today? Anyways, now the world's wide open. I mean, I'm not going to argue and go over the goods and the bads of all this stuff, at least not ad nauseum, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit, because for the first time ever, you and me and everybody in the world who has any type of creative music bone in their body can write, record, and publish music and put it out for the whole world to see. And it's amazing. And honestly, it's an opportunity that we never would have had 20 years ago, some even 10 years ago, that now it's massive. And obviously this spelled the death of all those record stores that you would see in the mall, and the death of all these big record labels and stuff like that. They still exist, but they exist a little bit differently now, because for the first time ever, artists, I'm going to use myself as an example. By the way, I just want to say that I'm going to tell a lot of stories, because that's how I convey, and that's how I tell, I get things across, is by telling stories. And so I hope you put up with me there a little bit with my stories. But anyways, with the way that music's published now, we're our own bosses, We're in charge of our own, destiny. And at the same time, we own our own intellectual property. We own our own IP. I own my own music catalog. I own my image and everything that comes along with it. And that's mine to choose how I deal with it, And yeah, I may not be selling, a million units, at Walmart stores or whatever. But what I am getting is a lot more reciprocation for my labor versus how the industry used to be. So with that, we are our own bosses. We have control of our own business. And it's also really important that we understand how that works. So now we have to take on the burden. What if I... Yeah, like I said, the 7th grade teacher thing. See, you throw in old memes, and you're like, hey, kids, I'm one of you. Anyways, that means that we have to carry the burden of learning this business and learning what this stuff means. And while I'm not going to give legal advice and stuff, I'm just going to cover some things that maybe, like I said, I wish I would have known earlier, or some things that I would like to tell people that you're not going to necessarily find in Google. Types of intellectual property. This image that I stole is intellectual property, and I used it in this slide. Trademarks, patents, utility models, blah, 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 trade secrets. This is just like the 6 most, common. But, intellectual property, like I said, is anything you create. That's your intellectual property, and how you go about copywriting that's not this presentation. But that's yours. You own that. And in today's music industry, in today's entertainment industry, it's very important that you protect that, because that is your income. So IP is big business. IP is huge business. Like I got we got the standard idea of what a record exec or whatever looks like. He's, a cigar chewing guy from the video game Merc, or in this case from the Power Team. IP is huge business, and there are companies out there that hoard IP. I think I found out recently the number one IP holder, like the company that has the most IP, intellectual property in the world when it comes to music, is Muzak, that company that would do all the department store versions of pop songs. I thought that was pretty interesting. But literally, that's all they do is just intellectual property stuff. They have these, they own millions and millions of songs that they then can license out, and do with what they please. But it generates tons of revenue for them. And then some of these companies, they're like, the hoarding this IP, hoarding every little thing that they can get, and they do this by having something to offer. They offer you something and like, hey, how would you like X, and then sign on the line, and now you've just signed over your intellectual property or your music catalog or your likeness or whatever it be, for whatever thing that they gave you. And that's not always a terrible bad thing, but if you want to continue to retain your intellectual property, it's probably not a good idea to be so short-sightedness. You want to look ahead. You want to see what the big picture is. This is a graph. Define your win condition. So I've got it. So here we're gonna get with story time. There's this game that I love. It's called Cosmic Encounter, and it's absolutely wonderful. I love everything about it. In the game, you pick an alien race. So there's like a deck of cards, and you pick kind of pseudoly at random, and the alien race that you pull, that's what you're playing the game as. And every race has their own specific win conditions. There's a character you can see here on the screen called the loser, and the loser is an alien race that they have a death wish, and the way for them to win is to lose every encounter that they come in, and so it's the other players then have to know what that win condition is, and then they have to make sure that that player doesn't lose, because then that player would win by losing, that kind of thing. So I think it's important that we identify what our own win conditions are. You have to ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve out of this? What is it that I'm trying to do? What's my win condition? So what series of events would I have to go through to consider this a win? So it's important to set up a win condition for yourself. I'll tell you what my win condition is later. And then you ask yourself, when you enter into a contract or a project or a deal, does this bring me any closer to my win condition? And oftentimes, yes, momentum's good. You want to always be doing something, and the answer is usually yes. But oh yeah, so I was a little bit behind here. Winning. What's my win condition? Does handing over my intellectual property get me any closer to my win condition? And when I say handing over, I mean signing it over. So if for instance, you get hit up with an opportunity, and someone's like, hey, I have an opportunity for you, opportunity A or whatever, and you're like, hey, that's really cool. That's definitely going to give me a bump, toward my win condition. But then you see, oh, they want you to give them your intellectual property. And I'll go over some examples later. Does that get you closer to your win condition? Does parting with your assets get you closer to your win condition? Stay hydrated. Now hear me out on this. It's really important to be hungry. You have to be hungry if you want your business to grow. If you want to get to your win condition, you have to be hungry, but don't be thirsty. Honestly, that's where mistakes happen. It's the deals that you don't take that can end up saving your butt. Don't be so thirsty that you're going to sacrifice long-term achievements for short-term gains. So be hungry. Don't be thirsty. Stay hydrated. Stay hungry, not thirsty. Try not to alter your win conditions to fit your opportunity. So, I really put the stories later in this thing. I want to tell some of them now. try not to be like, oh, okay, well, this was my win condition or this was my goal, but I mean, I could always change it so that I could get this opportunity. In that case, that was never your goal. Stick to the path. And also, protecting your IP also means protecting your value. This whole idea of working for exposure, never work for exposure. That's stupid. Don't do it. Honestly, your IP is so everybody for the most part of their win condition is providing for yourself, and unfortunately we need money in this world. So providing for yourself, earning an income, getting money is part of our win conditions. Obviously, my win condition isn't getting a yacht or anything like that. It may be as simple as having a reliable car to go on my next tour or something like that. But when you're working for exposure, that's never an acceptable way to get paid. You can't buy anything with exposure points. You know what I mean? And I know that I'm supposed to be talking. This is tangentially related to intellectual property, but your intellectual property is only as valuable as your last time you licensed it. So if you're letting your music get used in all sorts of things for free and stuff like that, that's kind of the bar that you're setting for your music. You need to have a little integrity and not take, not saying nobody doesn't have integrity, that's a weird way to put it. I always second guess what I say after I say it, so I apologize, I'm going to do that a few times. But don't work for exposure. That helps nobody, and that just, that brings all ships down just a little bit. Exposure should be the tip. Exposure is great when it happens. I've gotten some amazing exposure. I had a really awesome experience with a Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studio, and they licensed 5 of my songs that they put in their Halloween attractions, and it was great. It was awesome. The exposure from it was monumental. It was insane. When I went on tour and ended up playing in Orlando, most of the people that came to that show had heard of me through Halloween Horror Nights, and it was awesome. But that was the tip. I got my rate plus the exposure, and I signed my name to it. That's how I sign it, with a little. So if you ever want to forge my signature, put a little smiley face on there. You'll cut mustard. But it's the tip. It was great. It was a great opportunity, and I'm so stoked that it happened. But if I was approached and I was told, hey, we want to use these songs, blah, 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 for exposure, I wouldn't have done it. You have to, yeah. So anyways, we're back here. Hey, kid, have I got an opportunity for you? We think of kind of devious contracts coming from these cigar smoking fat cats, that kind of thing. But it's not always those guys. Story time with Jesse. This is, I'm going to call this one the New Blork Times. Not to be confused with anything else that rhymes with that. But I was contacted by a publication that was working on a project that wanted to use one of my songs for their project. And I was insanely flattered. It is one of the biggest publications out there, and getting to work with some industry professionals was really awesome. It was a great opportunity. So everything was going swimmingly until they dropped the whole exposure thing on me. Basically, their whole stance is that I was going to be exposed to ABC, XYZ, whatever, all this stuff, in lieu of any type of monetary compensation. They even went as far as to kind of be like, hey, it's not like we're asking you to write a new song, and that to me means that everything that I'm doing, all of my intellectual property that I own, is worthless in their eyes. And if that's the case, then that's not the person I want to work with, right? So I passed on the opportunity, and that was no hard feelings. We moved on. The project came out, And sure enough, they used somebody else's song because I was curious. I followed up. They used a different person's song, and they did not credit the person anywhere. Their name wasn't anywhere. There's no clickable links. I had to use Shazam to find out who they were, and if that's the case, that's your exposure. Their exposure is that guy got one Shazam ping from me. That's what he got, So what you do with your with your intellectual property means a lot. You have to read your contract. I'm getting a G-force pop up here. Go away. You have to read your contract. Even it doesn't matter who it comes from. Read your contract, and you're not going to understand a lot of stuff in contracts. Doesn't matter what type of job it is, however small, trivial, whatever, because things get slipped into contracts sometimes, and I'll go over that here in a minute, that you might not notice. Let it sit for a day. So read the contract, right? Process it, digest it, and just let it sit. Anybody who tries to rush you into signing a contract and getting it back immediately, that just feels nefarious. I always let a contract sit for 48 hours sometimes. We got time. We're going to work stuff out. We're going to feel good about ourselves. We're going to know where we stand. By the time the contract's signed and returned and all that, everybody's good. Everything's good. And everybody has the utmost patience when working professionally. Rushing somebody when it comes to signing a contract is very unprofessional. And that's a big red flag. So let it sit for a day. Read it again tomorrow, with a fresh set of eyes. Read your contract again. And Google phrases that you don't understand. Stuff's going to pop up all the time. And you're not going to, okay, what does this mean? There could be things like morality clauses and stuff like that. Well, what does that entail? What are the moral rights? That's a good one. Google it, look it up, and see what that means, and see if that gels with you. Make sure you understand everything, and before you sign a contract, and don't be afraid to ask for modifications. Clarify something like, hey, I saw this, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it and stuff. Usually when there's a contract, you're talking to somebody's legal team. It's literally 100% of their job to get all this stuff squared away and cataloged and all this stuff. And don't be afraid to ask for modifications. I do it all the time, and it's never a problem. I think that we're so used. We all have that feeling of wanting to just kind of be easy to work with, And just because you're asking somebody to modify a contract doesn't mean that you're not being easy to work with. No one cares more about you and your music and your business than you do. So, politeness aside, look out for yourself at all times. And if somebody thinks that you are being hard to work with because you asked for a modification of the contract, that's a red flag right there. Maybe you shouldn't want to be working with that person anyways. I got a story for you when it comes to that. I was asked, I actually pursued this, I'll put it that way. I pursued a performance at a last year. COVID was crazy, and I like playing shows. It's one of my favorite things to do in life. It's literally drives me, playing shows, interacting with people, getting on stage in my silly costume and guitar and doing my thing. That's what drives me. So 2020 was really crappy because I couldn't do that. It couldn't scratch that itch. So I tried to get on some of these streaming shows, and one came by that I really kind of fought tooth and nail to get onto because it was pretty prestigious and neat. And I got the opportunity. Everything was going great. Everything was awesome. Everything was 5x5, and I was just so excited until the contract came. And then I was reading the contract, and it was very broad. It was probably the most broad contract I'd ever seen, and it had a lot of really concerning things in there. Now, because it was streaming on multiple platforms, they had to make sure that they had the rights to the music that was being performed and per streaming platform. So I understand that, But when they put together this contract, they made it so broad that there could be argument on their side that they pretty much own all of my music to do with however they please for eternity. And I wasn't okay with that. That really irked me. There was also a clause. There was also a thing in there about how they could then transfer those rights to anyone that they see fit. So realistically, say 5 years from now, somebody buys that company and they then own all of my music, and then they can license my music out however they see fit. That just didn't gel with me. So I asked for modifications on it. I wanted to kind of readjust some of those perpetual, forever till the end of time type things, and they weren't so receptive to that, and so I ended up not being a part of that. And that's what I mean when I say things like, don't forget to hydrate. Okay? I missed that opportunity. And I'm a little bummed about it, but at the end, I sleep well at night knowing that there aren't any loose threads or loose ends out there, contracts that I'd signed, that could come back to haunt me later. Because I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't so famished or parched that I would take that, And that's what I think one of the biggest, most important takeaways is just don't forget to hydrate. Stay hungry. Keep on hustling. But don't let anybody make you do something that you feel is uncomfortable. Repeat necessary steps. Keep on going. Ask for another modification. Ask for a rate modification. I've done that before. I've talked, blah, blah, blah. Things are going well. And then the contract shows up and I'm like, could we change the rate on this? It's kind of a weird one to do, but there's nothing that you can't ask. And if they say no and it still meets your requirements of getting to your win condition, go for it. Hey, look, it's Eddie Deason. Hey, buddy, I've got an opportunity for you. All right, we're going to get all sorts of cool gigs from friends and people that we know. And like that guy that you went to elementary school with, and he's got some cool project going on and he wants to use your music for it, or a friend that you made online, and all sorts of different things, And, I'm not going to get into the litigious nature of exactly how you should handle music and stuff like that, but like, let's say, for example, here's a real one. A buddy of mine, somebody that I knew for a really, really, really long time, was making a movie. And I was so stoked for him. It was such a neat thing. It's something that he's always wanted to do and he always worked at. And he wanted to use one of my songs, and I was so over the moon about it. I thought that was so neat. Yeah, let's definitely do this, And, we talk about don't work for free and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to tell you exactly what all my deals were and everything, but at the same rate, like at this, I'm not going to necessarily charge an arm and a leg, for my buddy who's making a movie or something like that. We can have our own deals. But with that said, the contract was horrid. It was really foul. It was terrible. Read your contract, even when it's from your friend. Even when it's from somebody you know. Every single contract, and read it. So this is Hanlon's razor, right? Never attribute malice to that which is adequately explained by stupidity. And it sounds a little harsh, but Eddie Deason over there, he literally just copied and pasted some, contract stuff that he found on the internet, and that was his contract. He wasn't out to get me. He wasn't out to dupe me. He wasn't out to become the next gold hoarding dragon. He just didn't know any better. He didn't quite have it all figured out, and honestly, it wasn't his forte. Maybe he should have had somebody else doing it for him. But, having to go through and explain, here's why I can't sign this, all that other kind of stuff, it made things really awkward and weird, and it really sucked. But at the end of the day, there was no loose ends. There was nothing, left for me to lose sleep about, or for something to come back and haunt me later, And I think about all the what ifs, Weird business things happen all the time. If I had signed that contract he probably would have never done anything with it ever, and everything would have been just fine. But let's say that film and its rights were sold to, another company. Now they own that, so it's best not to have those loose ends out there. Story time with Jesse. All right, so this story is called Very Important Hollywood Film Thing That May or May Not Feature RoboCop. So I got the opportunity of a lifetime. It was phenomenal. It was a franchise that I have loved my whole life, and I have songs written about this franchise which will remain nameless. And there's this big project coming through, and they reached out to me just to know that the universe had worked its magic, that I'd put enough energy out there that had focused on this one thing that it came back to me. So being involved in this, knowing that some of my music was going to be part of this world, was one of the greatest things that, I cried with happiness. It's literally like win condition level amazing stuff, right? The downside was the contract showed up and everything said exclusive, 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 exclusive. And that means that I would it was such a hard decision. Am I going to give the exclusive rights to my music, to these songs, to this company in exchange for rate plus being involved, which was the most important thing, or was I going to say no and miss out on everything? I think early on, my win condition was always to retain my own IP, is to retain my intellectual property. So I had to side with that. I made the decision to go with retaining my own intellectual property. But that's not to say, oh, there he is. That's not to say that I just said no. I messaged him. I was like, hey, can we have a talk? Yeah, sure. Talk for a second, and we find out, oh, that was supposed to say non-exclusive. Oh, okay, cool. Boom, boom, boom. It gets fixed, gets sent to me. Boom, boom, boom. It's all done. Bingo, right? That's how easy it is. You just have to talk to people. Let them know what your concerns are. And don't be afraid of sounding stupid. I am stupid. I know that. So I'm not afraid of sounding stupid. And I can call up people, and be like, hey, I don't understand what this means. Buyout. What does buyout mean? So that's a picture of Corey Feldman's character from the video game Normality. This story has nothing to do with the game Normality. It's a cool cyberpunk game. A cyberpunk game. Anyways, this game had a really interesting contract in that it was about this. I'm talking about a different game. Not the cyberpunk game with Normality. I'm talking about a completely different game. There's a new game that came out, and it was hyped up more than anything I've seen in so long, and it really went in line with the whole dark synth wave, future punk kind of aesthetic, the thing that Street Cleaner definitely is. But the contracts being sent out to artists for this video game were complete buyouts. In that they bought the song. They owned the song outright, 100% of it. So when you sign that contract, so say they had in-game radio stations that they needed to fill with music, they went about trying to find music in the real world and licensed and bought those songs. They didn't license them. They bought them outright. And I've seen people take this before and go into this, take this, offer. But when you do this, you're You're giving them your IP. It's gone. That's not your song anymore. You know, that song, every play it gets on Spotify, it's there 0.004 cents, you know. But if that's in line with your win conditions, then so be it. I just know for me, I'm not on that game. I have nothing to do with that game, the hypothetical game that I'm talking about. Don't forget to hydrate. It would have been really cool to be part of something huge, but at the same time, I own my intellectual property. It's mine to do with what I please, and that even means it's mine to say no. It's just as important to say no as it is to say yes. E-labels. Oh man, this is a weird one. This is a thing that sprung up over the last 10 years, I think. A lot of folks have seen how easy it is to self-publish their own music, and so then they start to publish other people's music too. And it's as easy as opening a record label Bandcamp page, for example. You know, and this is really prevalent. It's really happening more and more often. And I just I can't wrap my head around it. Because the way the record labels used to operate, you know, going back several slides ago, was you'd get signed to a record label, right? And they would have some type of deal, whatever sorry, I got hiccups now. Whatever deal that they had, and then they would get you into stores, right? Because you're not going to get yourself into Sam Goody. You're not going to get yourself into Walmart, Blockbuster Music, whatever. You know, you're not at the warehouse. You're not going to get your music in there, but these labels are. They're going to do that for you. Well, these e-labels, a lot of times, it's almost like I don't understand what they have to offer. You know, oh yeah, well we have 10,000 followers or something like that. It's like, okay, 10,000 followers. Is that worth letting them have a perpetual 50% of your income and control over your IP or whatever their offer is? It's really bizarre. And it's just really something that I can't wrap my head around, is the e-label, the electronic label thing, you know, and it's usually run by an artist themselves, and that's a really big red flag. If the person who is now controlling your intellectual property, you know, they say, oh, we're going to get you, we got contacts with all sorts of sync, you know, music, this, that, and the other. And, you know, like when this company goes looking for music, they browse our catalog. Well, when the person who's running that is also a musician on that label, which more often than not is the case, they're going to take the job first before they let you get the job, because they're going to get 100% of it. And that's not always the case, but I see that happening over and over and over. And I just, be really careful when it comes to e-labels. Really do your due diligence and research on that, and understand what kind of value you place on your intellectual property, on your music and likeness and name and visuals and all that stuff. Live performances. That's a whole different world of intellectual property and contracts and stuff like that. You know, a lot of times, contracts from live performances, they just need the rights to use your name and your likeness for, you know, advertising and stuff like that, for putting things out there. Hell yeah, have at it, man. Use my name, this, that, and the other. They always have like usually have a clause for like, for this duration of time or for this purpose, that kind of thing. That's what it's all about right there, and that's A-okay. The only time I ever had a problem with a live performance contract was, it was story time. This guy had a thing slipped in there that said that that they would get, how did they word this? I probably should have like censored it and put it in a slide. But they basically tried to say that any show I tried to play in that region again, they had to get dibs on first. And if they passed, they were going to get a percentage of the revenue I made for performing that show. And it was, excuse me, like, absolutely not, you know? So yeah, back to a phone call. Hey, we need to change something. And it's funny how it plays out. Don't be afraid to ask for modifications. This is really weird, but I'm getting to this point. Did I do that? That's what I hear so often when things like that get slipped into contracts that otherwise are innocuous. They go like, what? Did I do that? Or they pass the buck. Oh, well, I'm going to have to talk to Steve. Or, oh, I'm going to have to see, that kind of thing. It always gets resolved. But listen, Steve Urkel, you put that in there. I know what you're doing. Everything about protecting your intellectual property isn't always doom and gloom. It's not always a dark, rainy day. Because rain's important. Without rain, we wouldn't get rainbows. Everyone loves rainbows. And honestly, that's right up there. That's up there with my win condition. Don't forget to hydrate. Rain is beautiful. It hydrates you. I'm using a lot of these little weird things here, trying to explain stuff, but that's what's important. This is a picture of me playing a show a couple weeks ago at Turbo Drive at DNA Lounge in San Francisco. I just wanted to slip that in there. Gene Draband, who introduced me, did not show up to that show, and I'm not going to forget about it, Gene. I had a lot of fun, and this is another neat story from me. I'm going to zip through real quick. I was poking through. Contracts go both ways. When I submitted my writer for this show, I put in a little weird thing just to see, and I put that I wanted any entry from the Chicken Soup from the Soul series. I put that in my writer just to see if they would read it, and sure enough, Devin, the general manager of DNA Lounge, got me a bag of cat food that is Chicken Soup for the Soul. So that means he read the contract and he honored it, even as weird as it was. So that's it. That's what I got for my presentation. We're on Q&As now. I heard Gene pop in for a second.
Yeah, bring me on.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Ishai, put us on
the side-by-side view real quick. Oh, man. That was such an amazing talk. I feel like your guiding line of, how do I put it, know what you want ahead of time as you're kind of going through your career is so important.
Yeah. When you don't know what it is that you want, and something like psychology is great. It's weird. It's awful and good. But when you don't know what you want and an opportunity comes to you, psychologically, you're going to try to make that opportunity fit into the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean? And that's where you get caught up. That's where bad things happen. And like I said, they're not always malicious. We got to remember Hanlon's razor. You just want to make sure that you're doing right by yourself, and early on identify what it is. Oh, and I said I was going to tell you guys what my win condition was. I want that damn blue check mark next to my name on Twitter. So come on. Anybody know a person? I'm on Nintendo. Come on.
In my defense to that earlier comment, I have not been outside in a very long time. I would have gone to the concert. But anyway, we have a couple of questions from the audience. This one's pretty interesting. Do you yourself work with a lawyer, or how do you get advice on the legal contract stuff when it's especially hairy?
That's a weird one, and I didn't really want to dive too much into the legal stuff, the technical legal aspects of things. A lot of times contracts have non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that in them as to who all is allowed to see it. Obviously, legal representation is, but I do have some contacts, and when there's things that I don't quite understand, I bounce that off of a person in particular, and I'm not going to blow up their spot. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's absolutely necessary at all, whatsoever. You don't get this far in life forgetting how to breathe. So breathe. Look at a contract, read it a few times, and if there's anything concerning, anything that jumps out to you at all, try to understand what that is. And, there's usually tons of stuff online that will help explain what that is. And, but if you can afford legal counsel, that's obviously the best way.
And that makes sense. There's a question here. Do you have more that you can say about good versus bad examples of e-labels?
Good versus bad. I think they all start out really good. We as people change. And I think that sometimes when our win conditions aren't met as fast as we want them to be, we'll drift and move on to other things sometimes, or change goals. And I think the bad side isn't always nefarious or weird, but it's that it starts out good. It starts out really good, and then maybe whoever is in charge or whoever runs the label, maybe they've done that drift or something, and then these labels end up being caught in kind of limbo sometimes. Also, it's never, I never understood the whole concept of having your complete discography of music spread across several different places. But good, let me think of a good one. Rosso Corso Records is an e-label, and that's really amazing. You know, all sorts of great artists are on there. Really amazing people. I don't really know how much I could say, but I think it should be public knowledge that they have a lawyer on retainer. They have connections with sync licensing. You know, they have a lot of that stuff. So the people that are on their e-label get a lot of that stuff. They get their contracts negotiated for them, a lot of that other stuff, and at the same time, it's the same split that labels that don't do anything will take. You know, I don't know what their base by base, case by case contracts are, but that's a really good example for in the synthwave world at least. And then, I think places like was it Musicat or whatever started out as an e-label. And absolutely everybody on their roster is doing great for themselves. That's pretty good. But you know, that's people that have stuck with it. You know, those are people that have found their win conditions, and you know, they created a label and they're running with that. You know, and that's good. But those are I feel like those are uncommon cases.
Sure. I actually had a question here. So you mentioned this concept of the win condition. How do you know when your win condition has actually changed, you know, as your career goes on versus, like you said, trying to map what's coming your way? Does this actually fit into, you know, like it's a tough question.
My win condition, I'm joking about the verified on Twitter thing, obviously.
Sure.
But my win condition early on was just to release an album, you know, just to finish something and release an album. And then, you know, you get sparks of, us artists are so freaking lucky because we get that runner's high without having to do any physical activity. You know, we get this spark of creativity. Something drives us, something hops into us, the spirit, and all of a sudden we get this idea that, oh, I want to make another album. You know what I mean? And then for the next 12 months, I'm chugging away on another album, you know, and my win conditions obviously have changed there. But I don't know, for me, I've always gone bigger, and I've achieved a lot of things that I've set out to achieve. I never thought a day in my life that I would write a song with Aubrey Hodges, who's one of the greatest composers of you know, the 32-bit, 64-bit era, in my opinion. I never thought that would ever happen, and so to be able to do that was just an absolute dream come true. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would have a song on an official Chex Quest video game, you know what I mean? That I wrote alongside with the original Chex Quest composer Andrew Bennon. Like those are things that I never would have put on win conditions early on. But of course, as things grow bigger, you know, I never would have thought a day in my life that I would, you know, help found a company that makes video games. You know what I mean? And that would be my primary vocation, you know. But yeah, as things grow, I'm gonna product Street Cleaner, the video game, available on Steam and Nintendo Switch.
That's a good lead into the next question. We have one in the chat that says, how do you handle your IP with Creaky Lantern Games? How is that different from your regular music?
Creaky Lantern Games is, as of now, it's me and one other guy, and it's I'm trying to think. That's a good question. That's a really good question. Because I have stake in both, I'm definitely going to use whatever opportunities I have to, you know, reach that win condition. Right now, you know, obviously, you know, providing a living for myself is definitely one of them. But I I'll license whatever the heck I want to myself. Is basically, you know, the whole Creaky Lanterns thing. You know, when it comes to, you know, I don't know. That's kind of like that's an interesting question. I mean, I know the thing is, I know the answer to that, but I don't know if I want to say it. Is what I'm saying.
That's fair. Yeah. No, but it's good to know that, you know, there are some differences. But how? So we're sorry. I'm hearing myself in your headphones. It's a little. No, it's fine. So we have time for about one more question. But is there anything else you wanted to say before we close out?
Stay hydrated. Don't be so thirsty that you take bad deals. And if you're anything like me, when you take a bad deal or something that doesn't really necessarily sit well with you, it really causes me to lose a lot of sleep and stuff. And so that's one thing that I would like to urge everybody is just to stay hydrated, emotionally, spiritually hydrated, and don't be so thirsty that you take bad jobs where you lose your IP or hand over your IP to somebody.
That makes perfect sense. So where can people find you?
CreakyLanternGames.com and street-cleaner.com. I don't have enough money to pay for Street Cleaner, who's squatting on the .com right now. But I'm on Twitter, Street Cleaner 82, Instagram, Street Cleaner 82, Facebook, Street Cleaner. Yeah, or if you just Google Street Cleaner synthwave or video game or anything, you'll find me there. I'm trying to be omnipresent.
That makes perfect sense.
My SEO's doing okay.
Well, Jesse, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your insight about decision making, really. Yeah. And, well, I think we're going to close it out and get ready for our next session. We're going to have Suzanne coming back for a concert.
Woo!
Thanks again, Jesse.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.